And in other news, the Methodist Church of Southern Africa is ordaining its first ever female bishop. Reverend Purity Malinga was announced earlier this year as the new bishop. Let's take you live there now, where Bishop Siwa is addressing some of those in attendance at that ordainment today.
To illustrate the point, one is responsible and one is irresponsible. The irresponsible leader is the one who takes the advantage of being in charge and sees all things as belonging to him. And in the parable is the him, it's not the head. Luke's story says that he, and I'm glad to secure you, he, not she, he falls on the dark grave of thinking that there is no one to account to. It becomes all about himself. The outcome becomes the oppressive behavior on those he is meant to take care of. He beats and hurts them. When there is no responsible leader, people get hurt and the future gets squandered. The game turns into being my time to eat and my time to drink. He eats in the parable, he drinks and he gets drunk. A drunken person loses control of self. Jim Wallace calls it the blackout, and he says it is more dangerous than the burnout. He says a person with a blackout is disoriented and not fully aware of what is happening around, and therefore does not care because he does not know. He's not aware of the damage that he or she is causing, even to self. Power, as we have seen, has the risk of causing blackout in the same way as does the intoxicating substances. On the other hand is the responsible leader who is watchful and fully awake. I read, I'm sure many of you have read the magazine in the SAA flights, which is now grounded, the Sawubona magazine, where Paulo Fiditis wrote an article and uses the analogy of the pilot, of the cabin crew, of the passengers, and even the ground staff that prepared the plane to get to an appointed destination. He says every crew member knows where the flight is going, and they know what to do and when to do it. He goes on to explain that an aeroplane has a cockpit. It has a cockpit in front and a cabin in the body of the aeroplane. The cabin crew manage what goes on in the cabin. But the pilot, he says, spends most of the time in the cockpit. And so, a responsible leader who is a care holder, just like the pilot, spends time in the cockpit, working to take all of us with all our baggage to a safe destination. And he says, over and above the cabin crew and the pilot, there is us, the travelers, who bring our own baggage, be it emotional or physical. And dealing with each of these in a cramped space is a tough exercise. There are those in the cabin working with the urgent needs, the requests and the challenges, but the pilot guides the direction. Conditions in the sky can be unpredictable and can change rapidly. Storms, heavy winds, and other conditions. And all these need to be navigated carefully to minimize the impact on the aircraft. Sometimes the passengers experience the turbulences, but a voice from the cockpit is reassuring. The pilot in the cockpit may direct that some services be interrupted for a while, and all passengers sit down as he or she navigates the turbulences. Those warnings come from the cockpit. If all were to be in the cabin, with no one in the cockpit, or with one who is a pilot with a blackout, no one will see the changes coming. No one will anticipate the turbulences and help us to navigate the turbulences. And so the world is in need of responsible leaders who spend time in the cockpit, seeking to have a wide view of where the plane is going. Every moment is shaped and tweaked according to the desired destination, but anticipating and always reading the signs of the time, that the storms may come up, heavy winds may come, and so therefore we have to navigate all the time. He says the cockpit has a very wide window which wraps around so that the pilot can see from many directions whilst the passengers don't see. I urge you, my dear brothers and sisters, as I urge every leader of a household, as I urge every leader of the school, as I urge every leader in business or in government, as I urge every leader in every society to spend time in the cockpit. The world and every congregation is in need of something called the cockpit, where the leader can have time to have a wider view of what is coming. And as you navigate, so says this writer, as you navigate, you cannot use the direction controls in a manner that takes you to Cape Town when you're going to Maputo. Sometimes it becomes a tragedy that we carry all direction controls and direct them as we used to direct them when we're going to Maputo, but drive the aeroplane to Cape Town. The world is in need of care holders, not shareholders, but care holders. Because the things cannot continue to go as they are in a continuous downward spiral. Haven't you heard? Haven't you read? Haven't you seen? Creation groans. The whole of creation groans. We witnessed recently what is happening in KwaZulu-Natal. We saw what had happened in Mozambique. The creation is groaning. The creation is in need of care holders. Not so much of the speakers, but of care holders, people who care. Not so much of shareholders, but people who care. Not shareholders who count the profits and say, what is it in it for us? And so even when the CEO thinks we should be changing the way because the CEO hears, but the shoulder says, you have to deliver. We need care holders who will listen to the groans. And more than the groans of creation, we will hear God weeping. God weeps when God sees and when God hears our destructive behaviors that harm even the very things that we depend on. And it is the poor who bear the most brunt. And God weeps. You would have noticed which houses were destroyed the most in KwaZulu-Natal. God weeps with the poor and the vulnerable. Surely you know that I've traveled around the connection, so you will not guess which part of the 6 countries I'm talking to. And I'm glad you will not know. I watched on TV one day, the house is falling down, heavy rains. I picked up the phone and phoned my only reference point in that place, the minister. My brother, how are things there? What can we do? And the answer on the other side is saying, no, I'm safe here in the men's. Behaving like a shareholder who enjoys the safety of what has been given to him. Not like a pilot seeing the wide view, that whilst I'm safe for the moment, those houses are falling, those people are dying, and therefore I must sound the alarm so that the society can respond. He's saying, I see on the TV, but I assure you, I am safe in the men's. The vulnerable groan has been witnessed in the many cases of gender-based violence, of abuse, of rapes, of killings. And at some point, I'll ask those who will be interceding to mention particularly the case of gender-based violence, the rapes, and the killings. Stories and stories of corruption come to light, and the future, we watch the future being squandered. People get displaced and exploited, and even those who come alongside to help get hurt, as was the case in the Central Methodist Church in Cape Town recently. The church leaders there had to be escorted, went away running, because all is not well. It is like an essay I read many time ago with the title, Stop the World, I Want to Get Off. There are times when the vulnerable feel that this vehicle called the world must stop so that we can get off. But the downward spiral has to stop, and it is the responsibility of the care holders to participate in the turnaround. Yes, the turnaround cannot depend on 1 or 2 leaders. but on every leader in every sphere of society. After the Rugby World Cup in Japan, I read the words of Eusebius Mackenzie in a recent article in the midst of the euphoria of the Springbok victory. He asked the question, whilst we were all celebrating, when we were all celebrating that Siya from that poor upbringing could rise to that level. But he asked the question that was not in most of our minds. And he says, how can it be that Siya had to go through that tough upbringing, which could have buried the chances of his talent to blossom? He said, whilst we celebrate the chance and the luck and the whatever of Siya going through, we must unpack the story of a young boy from Sweden who had to go to a shipyard to watch a World Cup which was going to lead in the future. What kind of circumstances which makes the children of the poor to go to a shipyard to watch rugby they love? And in the process could get their very talent buried, because in the shipping they'll get hooked to all sorts of other things and not watching from the safety of their home. And those of us who have more than one TVs in the home, with the children watching in that corner and others in that corner and the guests in that corner, we can say with my dear brother on my phone, no, we are safe and my children are safe in my house. And Eusebius writes, and I quote him here, the statistical odds of overcoming violence, of structural inequality and poverty are very low. No one should have to be a statistical outlier. No poor child should have to be almost superhuman to break the curse of intergenerational poverty. The unequal distribution of resources and lack of access to life opportunities caused in the main, and I add, caused in the main by irresponsible stewards of the world's resources, who think that everything belongs to me and for me and my own. The injustices perpetrated by irresponsibility, by lack of care, by greed and corruption must be smashed as we strive towards shaping the future. Listen to Thomas Gray. Too many a flower is born to blush and sing and waste its sweetness on the desert air. Whilst we worship in comfort, whilst we enjoy the gifts of God given to us, too many a flower is born to blush and sing and waste its sweetness in the desert air. Praise be to God who helps Siya to navigate those turbulences. But he is only a fraction, only a tiny fraction of the statistics. Indeed, the world is in dire need of responsible careholders who are watchful and who have an attitude that cares not only for the now, but for the tomorrow. It is the responsible careholder who is free from blackout, who realizes what John captured in chapter 1, verse 16. From the fullness of his grace, we have all received one blessing after the other. There is no need to scramble and grab, even from the weak of society, which results from the blackout of thinking that we should grab as much as we can because it is going to get finished. We should grab even the little resources from the VPS bank that comes from the old grant receivers. Let's grab them. Let's clean the bank because it's going to get finished. My dear friends, blessings of God come like ocean waves, one after the other. They get blocked. They get redirected by hoarding, by greed, by corruption, by lack of care. I have been in the leadership for a very long time. I never dreamt that I would stay this long. Very long time. And some people told me that, hey, you need to get out, man. You're now beginning to behave like the African leaders. And I heard that. But the gift of this length of time has made me experience and see and hear many things. I've been able to watch good leaders coming. I've been able to interact with them in the course of their responsibility. I have seen them losing the human face. I've seen good leaders with good intention losing the human face and become as destructive as those who were before them, or even more. But the responsible leaders, they know that they have got to account to God of life, in whose household we are only the guests. We are the guests, not the owners. It was Pope Francis in a homily on the 19th of September who said that, I'll now speak to my colleagues. Ministry is a gift which should be appreciated and shared. He said, in the ministry, the act of doing is in the second place. The first is to receive the gift and take care of it. From the receiving flows everything else. The receiving of the gift. As you receive the gift, you realize that you are the recipient. You realize that it is meant to be appreciated and shared. He goes on to say, when we forget this and appropriate the gift and turn it into function, then we lose the heart of ministry. And we lose the gaze of Jesus, who looks upon us and say, follow me, follow me. You no longer take time in the cockpit to say, speak, O Lord, your servant is listening. Because when you lose the human face, you think it all belongs to you. It comes to you because you deserve it. No! No. I've learned in the years that there was no moment for me to deserve what I've been asked to do. It has been a gift. It has been a gift. And there are many poor people who could have nurtured this gift and used it for far better use than my own limitations. It is a gift. When God has done something positive, when I'm present, and people begin to think that I had a hand in it, I want to run away because I know that I'm not capable of doing anything. I only listen. I only look up to the gaze of Jesus and listen to the voice that says, follow me. And I add here, all of life is a gift to be shared. And a responsible caregiver knows that she or he has to cherish the gift and care for it, being accountable to God the giver. As such, the careholder cannot violate and exploit. The caregiver cannot be greedy. The caregiver cannot be deceitful, because he realizes that those whom he has deceived before may sit in the very seat that he or she is sitting, and begin to realize it has all been deceit and lies. The careholder knows that human beings are not the personal property to be exploited for own benefit. Knows there's an owner to account for. A responsible leader is a careholder. If you forget anything that I've said, I'm making a call that there be the multiplication of careholders in every household, in every community, in every business, in every public space, and more so in the church. If you remember only that sentence. If you remember. A responsible leader is a careholder, not the owner. I'm sure you have read Psalm 24. The earth and everything that is in it belongs to God. The psalmist reminds us. So even the squabbles around landowner, they are out of tune. They're out of tune. Those who had the opportunity to own the land before everyone else, they say, the land cannot be taken from us. It is ours. I like the Palestinian Christians who say, the land is not ours, but we belong to the land. The land is not ours. It is us who belong to the land. The land is a gift to be appreciated, to be shared. We are careholders who have no right of disposal. You know, the old creation story in Genesis chapter 2 puts it back better. God created human beings, male and female, blessed them. And when you read that text, you realize that when you go to the later creation story in Genesis 1, there is that word that messed it up. The problem comes with the reading of the word subdue the earth, which is interpreted as trample down, bring under control. We sometimes miss the words that go before the word subdue. The words are recorded in the King James Version as I read. And I'm going to read slowly, so that as we live here, those words ring stronger than the word subdue. Be fruitful and multiply. And listen to this, and replenish the earth, and then subdue it. Be fruitful, multiply, replenish, and then subdue. There is a projected longing to be a co-holder. The reading of this verse should always be contrasted with the motif of the older story in Genesis chapter 2, where the command is to work the earth and take care of it. We are careholders in the household of God. Human beings are given authority and responsibility to care and not to plunder and to exploit. The purpose of God in creation is waiting to be fulfilled when us human beings are invited and respond to the invitation to be responsible careholders in every space of our influence. Repentance and new obedience to God is needed at this time. It is sacrificial and required turning away from following our own rebellious impulses, knowing that we are careholders. When responsible leaders and careholders multiply, the quote of the prophet Isaiah in chapter 24:32 becomes a reality. Each one of those responsible leaders, each one of those careholders, I quote, each one of them will be a shelter from the wind and a place to hide from storms. They will be like streams flowing in the desert, like the shadow of a giant rock in the barren land. Their eyes and ears will be open to the needs of the people and will say what they mean. No one will think that a fool is honorable and say that the scoundrel is honest, quote unquote. In order for us to be on the way towards the promise, there must be someone in the cockpit of every household to see the dangers coming. There must be everyone in every household to know that the textbooks have not been delivered on day one of the school, and not wait for section 27 to discover in October that children in the schools in Limpopo have no textbook. Where were the parents? Where were the members of the congregation in which those children went to, if they go anyway? Was there no space there to say, have we all received the textbooks? Oh, there were lungs for careholders. There must be someone in the cockpit of every school, of every community, of every business, so that when the intelligence report comes and say this employee does not deserve to work here, the caregiver in the post office will say, not in my post office. When a rapist and a pedophile is reported in any society on every congregation, the congregation must be able to say, this one with this kind of behavior will not come into leadership. In my time, I have seen people toying against the leadership. When the leadership say, this abuser must stop, they say, what right have you? This is our anointed pastor. Until everyone of us becomes a careholder, because we know all perpetrators, all thieves live amongst us. And they sit in our pews. And we whisper behind their back. And we don't care as long as they don't touch mine. There must be someone in the cockpit of every congregation who sees wider, knowing that the aircraft carries all of us with all our baggage, different kinds of baggage. There must be a healthy person in the cockpit of every public entity who is not drunk with power or any substance, to ensure that there is no harm to anyone but good. There must be someone in the cockpit of every local council or legislature or parliament in the 6-member countries of our connection and beyond, to see the turbulences of self-serving coming to put the aircraft at risk. Every congregation needs a cockpit. Does your congregation have a cockpit? Or is everybody in the cabin, not seeing the wider view? This is the responsibility of all of us as we seek to shape tomorrow today, as we work towards the vision of a Christ-healed Africa for the healing of nations. We need caregivers, care holders in every space, care holders who mean what they say and who care with their whole selves, fixing all senses to the Lord of all life, whom the writer of the hymn, J.B. Gardner, says, who will save our land and people? Who can rescue us from wrong? We are lost, faint, false, and foolish. We have slighted God too long. Save the people, Lord, our Savior. Guide us home from a country far. Holy fire, consume our rancors. Thy kingdom come in Africa. We believe God is our Savior, Christ enough to heal our land. May His church in loving service show to all whose path is life and give a clear, united witness and proclaim Christ is enough. Christ enough to break all barriers. Christ enough in peace and strife. Christ enough to build our nation. Christ enough for death, for life. Christ enough for old and lonely. Christ enough for those who fall. Christ enough to save the sin sick. Christ enough for one, for all. Let the thoughts, the meditations, the words, and the actions of responsible care holders give a clear, united witness, so that this may be a reality. If I was able to sing, I was going to say, if you believe and I believe.
Bishop Siwa giving his address there at the induction of Purity Malinga as the bishop, the first ever female bishop of the Methodist Church. She hailing, raised rather in Ixhopo in KwaZulu-Natal. We understand she's a trained teacher and basically joined the church in 1981, just being a teacher, practicing just for 5 years, we understand. You'd also recall she was the deputy president of the South African Council of Churches as well. One would say this indeed is a historic moment. If you look at the patriarchal glass ceiling that has been broken of over 200 years, you'd recall, of course, in the process of her being brought into this position, she would then, of course, through a ballot, be elected through 12 synods of the church, and that would be the process that would need to be followed. Previously, also describing her, Bishop Siwa, saying this is also an affirmation and the acknowledgement of the Methodist Church in its belief that black women can lead. We'll certainly try to take you back there once again at the induction of course, Bishop Purity Malinga as the first a female bishop of the Methodist Church, taking over there from Bishop Siwa. That taking place in Germiston here in Johannesburg. We'll try to take you back there a little bit later as